is Lynn Terry. I'm one of our sales VPs here at Salesfusion. And our president, hold on, let me just start over. I just had a weird pop-up. Sorry, that's just awful. What is it? Yeah, I'm actually transitioning to marketing. Currently, only staff can participate in the conference call to begin speaking the entire audience to start broadcast. Oh, that's what happened. Here, Kayla, you might want to help me with this. From Heinz Marketing. My name is Lynn Terry, and I'm the VP of Sales over here at Salesfusion. Today we're going to learn a little bit about successful collaboration between sales and marketing with MAP. Just as a brief introduction of Salesfusion before we jump into MAP's content, Salesfusion is based in Atlanta. We have a presence throughout North America as well as NIA based in London. We were founded in 2007 and have over 60 employees now and have served over 1,000 customers globally. So we are a B2B marketing automation platform primarily focused on the middle market but extremely robust, serving customers across many verticals. And Matt Heinz is joining us from Heinz Marketing. So he's the president of Heinz Marketing, and he spent his career helping B2B companies build and manage pipeline. Heinz Marketing is based in Seattle, and there will be some contact information at the end of the presentation as well. And with that, Matt, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Very excited to be here. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and appreciate the opportunity from Salesfusion. As we go through this event today, if anyone is on the Twitter and would like to share highlights or even ask questions, feel free to use at Heinz Marketing or at Salesfusion, and we'll be able to check those out as well. So with that, let's just go ahead and dig in. Let me see if I can. There we go. All right. So, it's interesting. I think when I started, this business about 5.5 years ago, the real focus from a lot of our clients was around demand generation, bringing net new prospects into the fold. And there really wasn't a whole lot going on programmatically around sales and marketing working together. What's exciting is that today we're seeing more activity around sales and marketing collaboration and this concept that, you can more efficiently call sales enablement. I think historically sales enablement has really been a sales function. It's been something that the sales team has done for itself. Either a sales trainer or a sales manager or someone in sales ops is providing the sales team with support. And then occasionally marketing will throw over the wall some collateral in the case studies and say, here you go. Well, that is changing, and I think as the lines between sales and marketing blur and as the buyer is unintentionally blurring those lines as well, it's forcing world-class organizations to collaborate better. So this is a stat that I thought really did as best a job as anything I've seen of defining exactly where that ROI can happen. So this is from a company called Demand Metric. They're an analyst firm that does some great work in the B2B space. They took a look at companies that were achieving their revenue goals as well as the companies that had great and different levels of integration between their sales and marketing systems. And you can see here that if you go from none to high, you get over a 2x increase in likelihood of hitting your number. The other reason I like this chart is because it's not binary. It's not all or nothing. A lot of companies that look at what we're going to talk about over the next 40 minutes or so, they look at what sales enablement means and what it can actually, what goes into executing that, and they can get intimidated and say, well, we can't execute all of that. Well, you don't have to execute all of that. If you pick one or two of those topics and you start to move forward on that, you start to make forward progress, you can move from 36% to 44% to 56%. Sure, 80% would be amazing. But if you can start to hit your number more consistently, if you can have more of your reps hitting their number more consistently, that's going to start to have a very material impact on your business. And the beautiful thing about this is that a lot of the sales enablement work that we're going to talk about here does not require new media, does not require new budget. We're not talking about new campaigns. We're simply talking about a better way of communicating with a buyer, a better way of engaging your operations, and a better way of getting your existing teams and resources to work together to more efficiently drive revenue. So when I think about sales enablement, especially from a marketing standpoint, my definition of that really is, let me go back, is revenue responsibility. Sales has been enabling itself forever, right? marketing, I think, finally gets to the table and is starting to create some real value when they take revenue responsibility. I've met a lot of heads of marketing that will sit in their chair and say, well, there's no reason, I can't really take responsibility for revenue. I don't control when the deal closes. Well, I go to a lot of sales conferences. We talk to a lot of salespeople and sales executives, and I have yet to meet a VP of sales that has control over when the deal closes. If they had control over when the deal closes, no one would ever miss their number. And it gets worse than that, right? I mean, if you're in a complex sales situation, in most cases, your buyer doesn't even control when the sale closes. If you've been in sales or you've been in marketing, you're involved in a deal, you've probably heard multiple times at the end of the month, end of the quarter, a prospect say, I would love to buy right now, but. So there's always a reason why that can happen. So let's take control of the deal off the table and instead assume and recognize that we're all in this together, that marketing doesn't get to keep their job unless sales closes business, that this isn't marketing versus sales, this isn't sales versus marketing, this is your organization trying to close business. What can you do together, given your unique roles, to better manage the buying process, to better connect with your prospects based on where they are in the buyer journey? How do you create revenue responsibility for the marketing team? Well, first is having that mindset. Second is making sure that there's some kind of compensation or incentives that drive that kind of behavior. And third, as we'll walk into here, is really having a common view of the buyer. The other reason I think marketing needs to have revenue responsibility is because marketing actually owns the majority of the buying process now. Depending on what research you've seen, I've seen different numbers that will tell us what percent of the buying process is completed by the time the buyer engages a seller. I've seen as low as 54%. I've seen as high as 73%. Well, even if the number is somewhere in the middle, it still means that the majority of the buying process takes place before sales is involved, which means that marketing now owns the majority of the sales process. Right? So we can argue semantics of what that means, but the main point is this is no longer marketing creating materials and sales driving the process. This is both teams working together. And the better you do that together, the better you're going to be able to have a seamless experience for that buyer, which is extremely important. If sales is telling one story and marketing is telling another, at best, that confuses the prospect. At worst, it pushes them away to someone else that they feel like knows what they're talking about. But if you create that consistent story based on the buyer's journey, from all of marketing steps into the sales environment, if you've got that collaboration that creates that efficiency, you're also creating velocity from a buyer standpoint. You're creating an increase in speed of close and an increased conversion rate of those closed deals moving forward. So let's talk a little bit about that buyer. Before we get into some of the semantics of how sales and marketing work together, this all fundamentally pivots on your understanding of who you're selling to. And first and foremost, if we're in B2B, let's call a spade a spade. We're not selling to companies. I have yet to meet a building that can write a check. It's people behind that building, people that work in that building that are writing those checks, that are making those decisions. B2B marketing is a lot more in common with B2C than we think, because we're still marketing to individuals that are making rational and irrational decisions, that are making decisions and deciding what they need to do based on logical as well as emotional stimuli. Even though someone should be making a purchase decision on behalf of their company and their best interest, they're also looking after their own best interests. What's in it for me? When do I get a raise and a promotion? Is this going to make me look good? Those are reasons people buy. They may not be the only reason. But the better you understand those individuals in that ecosystem, the more likely you're going to actually get someone to move forward. I'm going to get my keys right here in a second. All right, so if you're thinking about the prospect right, and you're building a plan together with your sales organization that's buyer-centric, these are the first 4 steps you want to do. These are things that you should be doing with your sales organization if you're in marketing and if you're in sales. Make sure marketing is part of this equation as well. Do the math, first of all. It's incredible to me how many sales teams have a number and marketing doesn't know what that number is. Or marketing has a goal of leads generated that has no bearing on what the sales team's metric is. I don't understand how marketing can come up with a lead goal if they don't know how many leads are required to generate pipeline, if they don't know how many deals in the pipeline are required to close business. So the first step is to do the math. Know what sales needs to generate. Know what the company needs to close. It's not just sales. Know what the company needs to close from a sales perspective and work back. What kind of pipeline do you need? How early do you need that pipeline based on your typical sales cycle? How many leads need to be generated in order to convert enough people that are qualified and ready to buy, actively ready to buy in your opportunity pipeline to close those deals? Now you've got some goals. Now you've got marketing goals that are tied to sales goals. This is fundamental, but it's incredible to me how many people don't do that. Second is that clear customer profile we started talking about. Who is it that we're selling to? What do they care about? I'd encourage you to take your product and service off the table for a moment, and instead of trying to translate your features and products into their business, go the opposite way. Start with the customer's needs. Start with their primary objectives. What are the reasons, what are the triggers that would make them interested in a solution that could achieve an outcome that you represent? And if you're in a complex sales situation, which I'm assuming most of you are, what's that ecosystem of prospects look like? Who's the decision maker? Who's the influencer? Who are the other people that may be involved in that deal you may or may not get to speak to, but that have different voices and that have different needs and have different worldviews around the problem you're trying to solve? And if you can align with them in terms of the problem you're trying to solve, they may never touch the deal. They may not be the final decision maker, but they can certainly grease that deal and help it move forward. So understanding that customer profile not only is an important step to map how the sale is going to get done, but also to make sure the content you're creating, the campaigns you're developing to generate awareness and interest, the message that sales is having at the beginning of the conversation, which obviously should not be a presentation, should not be let me show you a demo, but should be a needs assessment based on your understanding of the customer and especially your understanding of that individual and their worldview that they're speaking with. So second is create a clear customer profile. Third is map the sales and buying process. I don't care where you came from and how successful you are at your last company. If you don't have a sales process today that maps to the way your buyers buy, you're creating artificial friction in the process. Now, you don't have to map it perfectly. Just because the buyer used to buying a certain way doesn't mean you can't deviate from that and create a system that actually helps them better discover what they need. Part of the reason you want to understand how someone buys and understand the stages that they typically go through in the decision-making process is so that you can create some catalysts in there. If it typically takes a prospect on their own 2 or 3 months to figure something out, if you can have a 15, 20-minute conversation to crystallize and quantify the opportunity or challenge or whatnot, that speeds up the conversation. It doesn't change the buying process, but you can create earlier understanding that speeds their path to achieving a result that actually ends up increasing the ROI for them because they get it going through them later. So when you can map the way that you sell, and this is for marketing as well, if marketing now owns the majority of the selling process, how do buyers buy? If you think about this in terms of sort of the initial states that buyers go through, people don't wake up one day and say, I'm going to buy something. They start with a set of experiences. They start with a set of experiences that start to challenge and loosen their status quo. What are those situations? What's the situation where's the status quo to begin with? And what are some of the situations in the insights that might start to loosen it? That's the beginning of the sales process. That's the beginning of the buying process that you are managing. And number 4, the fourth piece of this is to plan to fire lots of bullets. The idea here comes from Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great. Many of you probably read that. One of his latest books is Great by Choice, and he talks about the difference between phenomenal companies and mediocre companies during difficult times, economic recession, post 9/11, et cetera. And he found that the companies that were phenomenally successful did lots of testing. And that's his analogy for bullets. He said, instead of going and just building the cannon to start with, they ultimately wanted a repeatable, scalable, high-leverage cannon, but they knew that testing and they knew that new ideas didn't always work. So they tested lots of things. They fired lots of bullets. Some of those bullets worked. Some of those bullets didn't work. But the bullets that did hit the mark, they'd fire a couple more times to validate they were onto something. Then they would put down the gun and pick up the cannon. Because at that point, if you invest the time and energy to build a cannon, you're much more likely or much more confident that it's going to work. The reason I put this into a sales enablement and a sales and marketing collaboration presentation is that you can have the best well-laid intentions in the world. You can do the math. You can have the profile. You can have sales and marketing leaders on board. But then when you go to execute, I guarantee you things are going to fail. I guarantee you some of the leads are going to suck. I guarantee you that many people and some of the salespeople aren't going to do what they're supposed to be doing. Or they're going to do things that don't work. And it is really, really easy when that happens to fall right back to where you may be today, which is sales and marketing pointing fingers at each other and saying, well, that didn't work, you didn't do your job, these leads suck, or whatever, right? Know that if you're doing this right, you're going to fail often. But create the foundation and create the management structure and create the environment that allows you to test, that allows you to fail, that allows you to quickly identify when something isn't working so you can stop firing that bullet and move on to the next one. It's an important mindset to have as you continue to execute here. We talked about, funny slides here. Okay, some of the headlines got a little messed up. We talked about calculating what you need on this one. So this can be pretty simple, and this is a very simple spreadsheet. You can pivot this a number of different ways. This version is a quarterly model that's pivoting off of the number of leads that a company has to generate. You could do this on a monthly basis, and instead you can pivot on the amount of sales you need to generate. But if you look at that yellow box up in the corner, let's say you got a couple different products, a couple different price points. Let's say you're used to seeing about 10% of your leads turn into opportunities and about 33% of your opportunities turning into closed business. If you don't have historical data, I would encourage you to actually be a little more conservative than that. If you've never done a model like this before, I would assume that 5% of your leads become an opportunity and 25% of your opportunities become a close. That tends to be a little more realistic for companies that don't have any historical math that can back up a more efficient model than that. You can always make it more efficient later. Better to scare yourself based on the number of leads you might need to hit your sales number now, because you can always tighten up and shrink. If you don't generate enough leads and you don't generate enough opportunities, you're not going to hit your number. Amazing to me how many people haven't done this simple math. Now, this math is by definition pretty basic, pretty ballpark. It doesn't even take into account sales cycle length, but it gets people in the right ballpark. And even if all you do is do this model for your sales and marketing team, you'll have a much better foundation of what sales needs from marketing to be successful. And in terms of sort of, thinking about that, that customer, again, the idea of product marketing, most companies have product marketing. My problem with product marketing, or at least problem with the term product marketing, is that it implies that everything is all about the product. It's not about your product at all. Everything you're doing is about people and problems. If all you do in marketing and sales is talk about people and problems, people and problems, people and problems, you give people the impression that you can solve for that problem. It doesn't matter what your product does if you haven't connected with someone based on a problem that they have. So when you're thinking about that customer, when you're thinking about that customer you're trying to market to, these are questions that I'll bet you your sales team can probably answer today. You don't have to go do a bunch of new research. You could. When we do this kind of process, when we do customer profile development for our clients, we don't do a bunch of focus groups typically. Oftentimes, we will just do a handful of interviews. We will talk to internal and external stakeholders that understand the customer and also understand the problems they face, that can not only tell us who those people are and what they care about and the outcome that they're seeking, the problem that they have. What is your objective and what are the obstacles that are keeping you from reaching that objective? But also, where do you find them? Who influences them? Who are the people in their own peer system? Who are the influencers and coaches and bloggers and other people that they're influenced by? Who in the organization? What does the ecosystem look like? So who are the people internally that have power? We do a lot of work with companies that are investigating, marketing automation software. And so we're doing that. When we do that with Salesfusion and others, it's interesting to get into the organization to understand the ecosystem you're selling into. The primary user of a marketing automation system is going to be marketing. It's amazing to me how many times the conversation is actually driven by IT. You'll have a marketing leader that doesn't understand technology and therefore says, well, this is an IT decision. Well, you can give it to IT, but then IT is going to make a decision based on, well, what's easiest for me, what's lowest maintenance cost, what's going to be, what's going to be less work on my plate. Less work on IT's plate may have nothing to do with whether or not it's actually going to work, whether it's actually going to achieve certain objectives. But it's important to understand if that's the ecosystem you're working in. If marketing doesn't make technology decisions, if marketing is deferring to IT, educating your buyer about what that means and the features that they need to be prioritizing and the outcomes that are important for them and what that means in terms of what they buy, that's part of your educational process, and you would miss that step and likely lose the deal if you didn't understand that part of the ecosystem. So knowing that is important for marketing, it's important for sales. Notice I'm not talking as much about marketing versus sales here. This is all one big thing. And just to reiterate the point, customers are rarely talking about you. No one really wants to buy what we're selling. What they're buying are outcomes. And you can think about this in terms of sort of selling the hole, not the drill. All right, the drill is the solution. We go to the hardware store and we physically buy a drill, right? And so it seems like we want a drill. We bought a drill. Well, no, not really. We started with the problem. I need holes. So I need to actually get these holes. I'm trying to build something, and I can't build something unless I get holes. So I need to get holes. Holes is the outcome, or maybe actually the outcome is whatever you're trying to build. But you can't build that unless you have holes, and you can't get holes unless you have a drill. So yes, we are buying a drill. But for your prospect, the drill in the buyer, and for the buyer, the drill and the solution is at the end of their conversation. They first think about the pain or the problem, and then they think about the outcome objective they're trying to achieve as part of that. Sometimes those are interchangeable. But in almost every case, the solution is the end of that discovery process. Unfortunately, for most sellers, we put the solution at the beginning. We describe the drill, and then someone else comes along and they describe their drill, and someone else comes along and describes their drill, and all of a sudden we're in a commodity situation. If you don't establish value up front, if you don't first and foremost establish that you can help someone achieve the outcome they're looking for, they may or may not have any interest in the drill that you're selling. So if you're selling a solution first and foremost, you're letting the buyer define what that means for them. You're letting the value translation sit on the buyer's side, which is a dangerous place to be. Not only because they may have different notions of what they're looking for, but also you're leaving the door open for a competitor to come in and do that value translation based on what their interests are and what they care about. So I'm going to quickly go through the prospect engagement funnel as it relates to this, right? I mean, we'd all love to have those immediately, purchasable deals. We'd love to have just deals that get right into sales and that close. But the reality is the majority of prospects aren't there. Just because someone downloaded a white paper doesn't mean they're ready to buy. Of inbound leads, we did a study a couple years ago of inbound leads from a variety of different industries. We found that 10 to 15% of those leads are qualified and ready to buy. 60 to 65% of those leads are qualified and not ready to buy. And this is where systems like Salesfusion come in really handy, because they allow the sales and marketing group to agree on what leads are worth sending into sales and what leads aren't. And this becomes part of your model. You know you're going to generate an awful lot of leads that are the right people that have a particular need that for whatever reason they're not ready to buy. There's 1,000 reasons why they might not be ready to buy. And the biggest problem organizations have when they're trying to push those not ready to buy leads into an active sales cycle is because they don't have enough leads to begin with. They don't have enough opportunities. They're trying to shoehorn deals into their pipeline that don't belong there. So if you do that math up front as a group together, you do that math up front and you understand how many leads are needed to fit in your pipeline, and you generate enough demand across the organization. This can mean, by the way, leads from marketing. This can mean, by the way, social selling activities by your salespeople. It all counts. But as long as the activity and the volume is there, so that you know that those 10 to 15% of prospects are going to be there, they're going to feed your pipeline, now you're getting somewhere. And of course, because I'm a hammer and everything looks like a nail, I think about those, blogs and communities and social media. I think of that as the top of the funnel. We can argue about whether or not the funnel is even a relevant metaphor anymore. But I think about people that are not ready to buy, that are still exploring, that are engaging, that are exhibiting and experiencing pain points and symptoms and buying signals that have nothing to do with the drill and everything to do with the hole. You are likely going to find across the social web prospects that are at early stages of the buying process that have no idea they're about to buy something. They're simply exhibiting and they're explaining a problem. A company that needs to buy a new Wi-Fi network probably isn't going to start with the CIO going on his Twitter and saying, hey, we need a new enterprise Wi-Fi network. Who can sell me one? What's probably going to happen is you're going to have people in that organization going to a social network somewhere and saying, boy, does our Wi-Fi suck. That's the early stage buying signal you're looking for. You're going to find those across the social web. You're going to find those in communities. We had a client once that was selling email software, and one of our best source of leads was looking for negative references to their competitors on Twitter. And these weren't people that were necessarily ready to buy right away, but these were people that we could engage with some value-added content. I'm really sorry to hear that you're having so much trouble managing your database. Here's a best practice guide we put up on our blog recently. It's helped a lot of other people save a lot of time. Hope this is valuable. Don't ask for a demo. Don't push them any further forward. But you've just made a positive impression and relied on something in context and started to build a relationship that can go somewhere from there. In terms of enumerating needs by role, this is a spreadsheet. I'm happy to share this spreadsheet with anyone that wants a copy of this. You can either tweet at me or just matt@heinzmarketing.com. Very simple, obviously, but the idea here is that every conversation you're going to have is slightly different. The way you talk to a CMO versus a CIO versus a CTO in an organization should be different based on their worldview. And their worldview is not about your product. It starts with their drivers. What are their objectives? What are their critical success factors? What's going to get them a promotion and raise? What are the objectives they're looking at on a daily basis? And what are the pain points that are keeping them from getting there? What are their objectives and what are their obstacles? Once you understand that worldview for each of those individuals, then and only then can you write messaging that fits your solution into that positions your solution as a way that addresses the objectives and solves for the obstacles. And to do that across different verticals and to do that for different individuals in those verticals, yes, that takes some time, but this becomes a legend. This becomes a key that you can use across sales and marketing for your content, for your blog posts, for your demand gen campaigns, for your downloadable offers, for your sales scripts. Imagine if you had this understanding. Imagine you knew someone came in, and you just got a white paper lead from a CMO of a target company. And instead of saying, hey, can I show you a demo, let's say that first sales call, let's say rule number 1 is you're not allowed to talk about the product or service. Let's say in that first sales call you got that white paper and you said, hey, Mr. CMO, I saw you downloaded that white paper. Did you get a chance to read it? No, of course you didn't. But we talk to a lot of, marketing executives, and we tend to hear some of the same, when we say what are some of your biggest challenges, we tend to hear the same 4 big challenges, and you read those off. And you say, which of those that I just mentioned kind of made you a little more, which of those made you a little more sweaty on your forehead, right? Which of those was more prescient than others? You'd like to spend a couple minutes qualifying around that problem. And if you do that right after 15, 20 minutes, you can say, everything we just talked about in the last few minutes, that's what we do. What we do is we solve that problem for hundreds or thousands of companies across the world or across the country. I would love to show you how we do that if you have time. Now, because you've gotten to the end of that conversation, you've qualified for need. You've got the CMO, you've got your target, whoever you're talking to, you've got them agreeing that, yes, this is a problem, yes, this is particularly a big problem for us, and you've helped them also even quantify what it might cost to not fix it. You've helped them quantify the opportunity cost of making a change and seeing results. They may not have thought about that way before. You can turn something from a priority 15 to a priority 2, priority 1, simply by helping your prospect do the math. So let's get into a few more specifics in terms of collaboration between sales and marketing. We've been talking mostly about sort of the buyer perspective and the buyer journey and what that means across a unified sales and marketing organization. Some additional things I think I would highly encourage those of you on the webinar today to think about. First is those common objectives. I mean, simply put, like if sales and marketing have different objectives, if they're working towards the different goals, there's no way that you can really create alignment and efficiency. Now, this doesn't mean that marketing comes in and every day has like a sales number they're trying to close. That really is marketing's job. But if marketing's goals don't align with the sales goals, if marketing isn't in some way responsible at least for sales opportunity creation. I've seen some marketing organizations that no longer measure leads as their primary measure. They look at leads, they use it as a sub-measure, but they look at opportunity creation. They look at pipeline contribution as their primary metric. And it's not just an overall number. They know exactly what volume of pipeline they need to generate every month or every quarter to help sales hit that number. And there's also a sales velocity metric they're looking at in terms of the sales enablement work that they're doing. So instead of just throwing a bunch of collateral over the fence and saying, oh, this is what you need, you should be using this, they're mapping and prioritizing the content they're creating and the sales tools they're creating to that common understanding of the buyer's journey and based on where they know sales is getting stuck in most deals. So common objectives is one. Common definitions is another. Does the sales and marketing team agree on what's a qualified lead? Which of these leads should go to marketing? Which of these should go to sales? I'm going to steal my thunder a little bit from a future slide here, but we talk about lead scoring. Any of you that are using Salesfusion or considering it, you're going to need a lead scoring model. Well, most marketing groups go off on their own and they build that lead scoring model and say, okay, here's the good leads, here's the bad leads. I would highly encourage you, if you're building a lead scoring model, to do that with sales. Do it as a collaborative project. Do not publish lead scoring unless sales buys off on the way you're scoring leads. And the most important part to collaborate with the sales team is actually in the middle. The A1 leads, you don't have to argue about those. Sales wants those immediately. You're excited to produce them as a marketing group, great. The D7 leads is very clear that they're not ready to go to sales. But what about the B3? What about the C1? What about the B2 leads? Those leads in the middle that you could say, well, should they not? Those are the most important leads to define from a scoring standpoint and then to monitor and measure. Because I guarantee you whatever lead model you start with needs to be refined over time. And there will be leads in the middle, some that should go to sales, some that should not. What are the patterns that determine that? How can you refine your lead scoring model from there? That needs to be a collaborative process. Sales needs to be involved in it from the beginning. They need to agree and understand how you started, but then be part of the process to define what those leads look like moving forward. Very important. Common compensation objectives. I'm not necessarily asking marketing to be paid on a commission basis, but at minimum, their bonuses should be tied to pipeline contribution and closed deals, not whatever else they're measured on today. I don't see a world where sales isn't ultimately responsible for the deal. Let's face it, we're not going to change that. That's part of what sales signed up for. I mean, salespeople, whether you're in sales or whether you're working with sales, they're a different animal. They've signed up for higher risk than most of the rest of us in the organization. They also have the opportunity to have higher reward. I know a lot of salespeople that make more money than their CEO, and the good CEOs love that. But they, every month, every quarter, that sales rep comes in and it's starting over again. Right? It's a scary job. So I'm fine, and most salespeople are fine still having that high risk, high rewards type of measure. But if you do all of this right, and marketing still gets paid twice a month and still gets their bonus based on some arbitrary metric, if you aren't tying bonuses, extra incentives, raises, and even title changes to pipeline contribution, you're missing an opportunity to align an organization. You can do things as a marketing leader to put people in the right place, but unless you create an incentive for people to make the daily changes and make the daily decisions that move things in the right place, you're not going to see the progress you want. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit just in the interest of time. The offline relationship building piece is really important to me, and I realize this can often require a little more effort and a little more work and sometimes a little extracurricular time. But I can tell you some of the best insights and feedback I got from salespeople in my career has not been in a conference room, has not been listening in on their calls. It's been over beers and nachos at the end of the day. I worked at a startup where literally across the parking lot was a bar called the Pump House. And this is back when, back in Washington where, you could smoke in any restaurant. Well, the Pump House was non-smoking. It always was, even before the rule, even before the law. Non-smoking restaurant, good cold beer, great nachos, sports on TV, what's not to love? You go there at 4:30, half the sales team's there. So as often as I could, I'd go hang out with them. And I'd hear what was working, I'd hear what wasn't working. So a couple things. One, I got better insight from those conversations than anywhere else inside the company during business hours. But I also was able to build rapport with the sales team. Salespeople are taught not to trust marketers. They're taught to expect that marketers are going to give them lip service, but then go home early and take their paychecks and not really care. And sales ultimately says, hey, we're in this on our own. We're on our own to figure this stuff out. And if you let them continue that mindset, they're not going to follow you. They're not going to pay attention to what you're doing. The more rapport you can build, the better relationship building you have, the better off you're going to be. This last piece in terms of measuring before and after satisfaction is also really important, especially if you're doing inside sales, especially if you've got a high volume of millennials on your sales team. There's a lot of studies that have been done on millennials, especially in the sales environment. From a compensation standpoint and from an incentive standpoint, yes, they like money, yes, they like things, but they more often like experiences. You give them trips, you give them great experiences, they're motivated by that. They're also highly motivated by recognition. They want to be praised a lot more often than older generations. It just is what it is. So if you're creating better engagement between sales and marketing, if this sales team feels like there's a material difference in terms of the way they're being supported and the way the entire organization is structured to help them succeed, they're going to respond to that. That's going to create an immediate level of satisfaction, a satisfaction gain that will precede results, but that will also help improve retention among that sales team. You'll keep salespeople around because they feel like they're being set up to be successful moving forward. This spreadsheet, which I'm sure you can all read because it's super large size font, basically takes those lead and opportunity definition to a next level. Again, simple spreadsheet, happy to share this with anyone, But the first step is to actually enumerate what those lead and opportunity type stages are. Most companies have that. Fewer companies have actually taken the time to create a common definition of what it means to be in that stage. Would sales and marketing agree on what it means to be in that stage and what it means to graduate from that stage? Many sales organizations don't even have this on their own, let alone marketing have any idea what that looks like. And then the two columns to the right define what sales job is and what marketing's job is at each one of those stages. What is expected of each organization at different lead and opportunity stages to help move that deal forward? If you do nothing else in terms of common definitions, then fill out this page and make sure both sales and marketing agree to it. The next steps and the action items will flow right out of this. You'll have a ton of ideas and a ton of opportunities to start to improve and prioritize what you're doing. The lead management process, we talked a little about the lead scoring. Lead management, once you generate that sales qualified lead, once you generate that new opportunity, where does it go? Forget service level agreements. A lot of organizations talk about having service level agreement with sales in terms of what the follow-up is. Well, that sounds a little more structured and formal than you need to have. If you're doing this right and you've agreed on what the good qualified lead is, sales are going to be motivated to follow up with those. Look, they're not trying to not follow up with your leads. They just want to make sure that the leads that they're getting are worth their time. So working together on that lead management process is important. Defining together what that lead scoring matrix looks like as well. We talked about this already, but understanding and focusing on the middle. Focus on the A4s and the B1s. What does it mean to be there and what's the follow-up action? And be prepared to make changes in the middle. Be prepared to split your A4s. Say, well, certain A4s are good and certain A4s aren't ready yet. And doing that with sales is going to get you better engagement. And of course, focusing on good content is important too. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. This piece we already did. So measuring our collaboration, you've probably seen a lot of metrics. I mean, ultimately, this comes down to hitting your number. That's the ultimate metric. I would encourage you to find fewer metrics to measure. Look at pipeline contribution. Look at deal velocity. Look at rep engagement. I think active sales selling time is also a really good measure of whether you're doing this right. What % of the sales rep's time is being spent on active sales activities? And then that before and after satisfaction is really important as well. Understanding that you're impacting the morale and the motivation across your sales team is a huge, huge part of this. So you got my email address there, my Twitter handle. Happy to share some of our best practice guides and ebooks with you. Salesfusion does a fantastic job creating some great materials as well. They've got some benchmark studies on sales and marketing alignment. So I encourage you to check out salesfusion.com for some of those materials as well. And Lynn, I'll hand it back to you.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate your time there. And thanks, everybody, for joining. I'll just bring you over just to our last slide here as well. It's a little bit of information on contact information for Salesfusion. So if you're reaching out to either Matt or us, we can get you in touch with one or the other. And as I mentioned at the beginning, Salesfusion is a marketing automation platform that is really the technology that enables the kinds of best practices and services in sales and marketing alignment, areas of focus and activities that Matt talked to us about today. So thank you very much. Everybody have a great afternoon, and we appreciate your time. Thank you.